Okay. Call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. My name is Richard Stewart. I'm the Mayor of Coquitlam, and Council is here for a public hearing. And after the public hearing, we'll have a council meeting as well. On behalf of the City Council, I'd like to welcome you all this evening. It's a public hearing into bylaws that will be announced in a few moments by the City Clerk. Council for the City of Coquitlam has given first reading to these bylaws and has directed that a public hearing be held. Staff from the City's Planning and Development Department will present a summary of each proposed bylaw. The floor will then be open to anyone in attendance that wishes to make his or her views known to council members. Those that have pre-registered will be given first opportunity to speak, and then we'll open the floor. I stress to all of you that this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for anyone who has a view on the proposed bylaws to make that view known to council members. Council members are here with an open mind and are here to listen to your input. No one has prejudged the outcome of these bylaws. But it's not a question and answer period. There are some rules associated with it. It isn't an opportunity to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with either council members, with staff, or with those in the audience who might disagree with you or be of a different opinion than you. So we ask all of you to please restrict your comments to the proposed bylaw, be as brief and concise as possible. We're asking speakers to limit themselves to 5 minutes at the podium. You can speak more than once. If you've got some more good stuff, just get to the back of the line and we'll make sure that way everybody gets a chance to speak. We also ask that all the audience members be respectful of each speaker and allow them to make their points without interruption. That's no cheering and no booing and no heckling any presentation that gets made this evening. As chair of this hearing, I reserve the right to conclude any presentation that doesn't apply to the bylaw before us, that becomes abusive in any way, or becomes repetitive of views that the speaker has already made known to council members. If you do wish to include a written comments in the public record for tonight's meeting, you have to hand it in before we adjourn that item on the public hearing agenda, and you have to hand it in to Mr. Gilbert, the clerk. The reason for that is council can't receive any further information after the adjournment of a public hearing on that item until after we voted on the item, either to proceed with it or to reject it. So immediately following tonight's public hearing, we're going to have a regular public council meeting. It'll be convened in order that council can give consideration to items on the public hearing agenda as well as some other items on the council agenda. However, if during the public hearing council members want more information or want staff to report back on certain items, we can defer consideration of an item pending the receipt of that information. I'll now call on Mr. Gilbert to introduce the bylaws on tonight's agenda, and the planning and development staff will come up and make a presentation on the first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item on this evening's public hearing is an application to amend the City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw 3000 to rezone the properties at 611, 613, 615, and 617 Regan Avenue from RT1 two-family residential to RM3 multi-story medium-density apartment residential. This is bylaw number 4383, and Ms. Tiffany is here to provide an introduction.
Good evening, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The subject site is located on the north side of Regan Avenue between Dogwood and Emerson Streets. The site is designated under the city's official community plan as medium-density apartment residential. Zoning on the site and to the south, east, and west is RT1, two-family residential, and zoning to the north is RM3, multi-story medium-density apartment residential. The site currently has 2 single-family dwellings and 1 duplex located on 3 lots. The applicant is proposing to rezone the site in conformance with the official community plan to RM3 multi-story medium-density apartment residential to ultimately construct a 4-story 71-unit apartment building. Staff are recommending second and third readings to rezoning bylaw number 4383. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one speaker on the pre-registered for item number 1, and that's Mr. Bryce Rossich. I believe he's speaking in favor of the proposal.
Good evening. My name is Bryce Rossich, Rossich Hempel Architects. The developer is also here as well if you have any questions of him. Thank you very much for allowing us to present this project tonight. Erica gave a very brief overview of the project, but before we do that, I would like to talk a little bit about who Marcon is and who Rossich Hempel Architects are. Marcon is a developer. It's had more than 27 years of experience in building communities and has constructed more than 8,000 homes. They've constructed everything from townhouses to low-rise apartments to high-rise apartments. They do that sometimes in concert with other developers that they're the builders for, but they also act as developer-builder, and that's what they're doing in this case. The interesting thing about that is when you're a developer-builder, you're going to be even that much more conscious of really providing a great product because you have to stand behind it for a long time. We've worked with lots of developer clients, and I'm not sure if any of them are listening tonight, but I have to say that Marcon really truly are one of the top developer clients that we've worked with. A little bit about Rossich Hempel Architects. You may know us from previous work that we've done here in Coquitlam. We've had the wonderful opportunity and privilege of working on a wide variety of projects in a lot of areas. And the areas include Coquitlam. We try very hard to understand sites and locations and try to be very respectful of those sites and design something that is appropriate to those settings. One of the principles that we have is that we are creating homes for people to live in, and our whole goal is to provide something that provides a better opportunities for a better life for people. We've won lots of design awards, but the key thing for us is not design awards. It really is recognizing the fact that these are future homes for people to live in, for people to work in and recreate and so on. And it's important for us to design something that's, that has the qualities that really add to a person's life. The site itself, you know where the site is. We're about a block away, a block east of the Evergreen line, so we're very close to rapid transit as well as the bus lines. We're also less than a block away from a park, so that's great for families and kids and adults too to be able to utilize the park. In a couple more slides, I'll show you some examples of some earlier projects on Como Lake Road that you have approved, but I just wanted to show you this for your reference. The site itself is on Regan Avenue, and just to the north, you recently approved, and they're under construction, 3 other projects on Como Lake Road. The first is the Georgia on the west end of that road, and just as a reminder, I'm sure you all remember it, but just a reminder of what you approved. The one in the middle of the site is Emerson, and that one's underway with construction as well. And to the east of that is a project that we, perhaps it's named now, we didn't know the name, and that's just to the east of us. So those 3 projects are immediately north of us, north of the lane. Our project, as you know, it's 71 units and 4 stories, and the architecture is what we would term quietly stately. Some of you may recognize, in fact, that we've made some improvements to the building since we last showed it to Council for first reading. Among the materials that we're using for the building are hardy shingles on the base of the building for the first 3 stories, and around the entire top of the building on the 4th story, board and batten accent band. We recognize that Regan Avenue is designated as a greenway, a pedestrian greenway, and so it's important that the building be designed so that it provides a street wall or a street edge to that greenway, so that there is a sense of form and mass on the street. We also had the opportunity, because of that, to provide individual garden gates to the first 4 units on Regan Avenue so that they have access to those. The building, as you can see, is a U-shaped building. It's got a private courtyard on the north side, on the lane side, that is part of the common outdoor amenity space. There's outdoor amenity space both inside and outside on the south side, and also a children's play area. Part of our consideration, and I can't tell you how complex it is to try to meet all of the requirements for height, land, site coverage, and parking, and still do it in a way that is respectful to current developments on either side, as well as future developments that might happen. So you can see that there's lots of stepping of walls and landscaping and other kinds of things. So I'm here to answer questions of council, and I hope that we have your support tonight.
Okay. We've already got two council members with their button push, so we'll start with Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Number one, parking requirements. Are you meeting the standard that's laid down by the city?
Yes, we are, through the mayor. Yes, we are, including the provisions that council has approved for transportation demand management and for payment in lieu. It's not been finalized. We're still working with the planning department to finalize exactly how many spaces that will be.
So what the parking standards are what, 1.20?
Yes, I have a slide that shows that if you want. The requirements, if you don't do anything else, are 96 stalls if the site is located close to a rapid transit station, which this is, and other methods such as car share, bicycle, bus passes, and so on are provided. The planning department can allow a relaxation of up to 5% of those parking spaces, and an additional up to 5% of the parking spaces can be provided by payment in lieu, which goes to common parking.
So you're not providing 96 parking spaces?
We are providing 88, you're correct.
But you've got here an additional 5% can be met by payment in lieu. Okay, the four stalls, you're paying the city something like $80,000 to do away with 4 parking spaces, or what is it?
It's been before council many times. That's the...
Yeah, I realize that. I'm getting at this, you know, that we're starting to pay the city not to put in the parking spaces. And we're going to give the city $80,000, therefore we'll be 4 parking spaces short. See? And that's what really is bothering me to no end. Because I'll tell you something, even with the guidelines that are laid down by this council, that is 1.20 from 1.75, went way down, okay? That you're not even meeting that requirement outside of that. You're saying, yes, I am, but you can be paying the city $80,000 not to put in 4 parking spaces. I'm totally opposed to this kind of development, totally. I'll tell you, we must provide the parking that we have to, because otherwise you're going to bottle up the neighborhood. The streets are going to be clogged up. The cars parked all over the place. And I'll tell you, we have a great problem right now in our town center with the same situation happening. That we relax the guidelines in parking. I don't think for 1 minute that I'll ever vote for any development that's got parking relaxation. I'm sorry, I'm just not in the mood for. I'm not gonna foist my decisions today on the future residents of this city. Thank you.
Okay, as you made clear when we dealt with that matter as a bylaw. Okay, Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Rosich. I just have a couple of questions, and it just around your adaptable 4 units, and just what is meant by your adaptable. Is that a adaptable accessible where you have the proper turning radius from the bathroom for a wheelchair, or is that adaptable meaning that there is structure in place for those units with studding to be widened out? I just want to know what is your, because there's different definitions.
Sure. These are for residences that are appropriate to a person in a wheelchair.
So they were in the bathrooms that have the turning radius and all that type of stuff.
Correct.
So these would be adaptable, accessible units. Okay. We just want to clarify, because when you get adapt, some people just mean they're putting studding in. Would you be willing to look at, with an aging population, to do what we'd call, what we generally call making units adaptable by having studding in or blocking in the bathroom area where you can put grab bars in at a later date if somebody needs to put in grab bars, put in some studding for where the doorway to the bathroom would widen out. I'm not asking for the turning space, but I'm asking for some of the other parts to be looked at for the adaptability. With baby boomers, aging population, there may be a higher market. I thank you for doing the 4 adaptable units. I'm glad you cleared that up for me. I really appreciate that being in there. I just sort of encourage you maybe to look at the other part of it and see how that can be factored in.
And in fact, if I might, I did speak to the developer ahead of time, and yes, he would be willing to consider that.
That is great news. Thank you very much, and I thank the developer for stepping up to that challenge. The other question I have is, you got an underground parking. I like the design and the look of that. You got a little bit of space above it. Is there a car wash area underground for people to wash their cars? Where's that going to happen?
Yes, there is.
Okay, perfect. And on the parking issue, we passed that. And within the town center, you know, I've been around a lot of the buildings, and there's a lot of excess parking that's not being available. And the thing we told developers for high-rise here is to maybe make that parking accessible for renting out for the stratus. But there's a lot of, I think Councilor Robinson can speak to that too, that there's a lot of excess parking, and we're just trying to match the needs to the desires within town center, SkyTrain accessible areas. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Reamer.
Thank you very much. My questions actually are for staff, and they relate to a couple of concerns that have been expressed to us. One is that there's so much development going on that parking has been very difficult, and litter and that sort of thing around construction sites has been difficult. So I'm just wondering if staff could please outline the timeline that would be involved with this should council approve it through to second and third reading tonight, and also address some of what we've become aware of in the fall concerning the Coquitlam area and concerns that were expressed as a result of construction.
Yes, through your worship. In response to the councillor's question, there is active, for lack of a better term, bylaw enforcement going on in this neighborhood with respect to the parking issues and as well with respect to the littering issues. We do have a staff person, an environmental and worksite bylaw enforcement officer who has been actively patrolling the neighborhood and issuing fines and also working, or issuing tickets, and also working and communicating directly with the construction contractor supervisors with regard to some of the issues that have been raised over the last 6 months from the residents.
That's great, thank you. And of course, we're talking about rezoning right now. There's still a process to go through before the building would be under construction and completed. So I was just wondering what that timeline might be.
That timeline depends on the number of outstanding issues that staff will need to resolve with respect to design regarding the development permit authorization. Usually the timeline between third reading and development, when we bring the fourth reading and development permit authorization back to council, can range anywhere between 2 months up to 5 months, sometimes longer. It all comes down to the responsiveness and timing of when we receive any resubmissions from the applicant pertaining to outstanding issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. My questions are actually a little bit similar to Councillor Reamer's, but I just want to clarify that the parking issues that are currently occurring in this neighborhood are related to the construction parking. That's the problem. It's not neighborhood parking. It's the construction.
Yes, through your worship. In terms of what our bylaw enforcement staff are doing, they've been issuing tickets with respect to vehicles that are illegally parked.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I also maybe I don't know if the applicant wants to answer this question. It's similar to Councillor Reamer's query that if things should go tickety-boo for you through the process, when's the soonest you would be breaking ground?
The expectation, I think, would be spring, late fall of 2013.
Late fall, thank you. And just to staff, because again, it's the same query about some of the other construction that's happening in the area, is any of that expected to be completed by late fall? Do we know? If we don't know, we don't know.
Yes, we don't know.
But I would expect, because some of them are substantially constructed, that a lot of the big heavy lifting, so to speak, will be completed, because we're still, 7-8 months away before they would even start, should this go through.
If I could, Your Worship, thanks. Obviously, as highlighted in Bryce's, Mr. Ross's presentation, there is a lot of development going on in that area, and so it's a transition period, and you'll have those issues arise. The projects along Como Lake are well underway, with the exception of I think it was the third one that's just been approved, so that'll be getting through the rest of the process. So they'll be stretching out for a number of months for those other projects. So I think as those complete, this one will be sort of coming online. So it'll be the transition in that area will be ongoing for a period of time.
Okay, and I have one last question, actually back to parking. Councillor Sikora mentioned that we have this huge challenge for parking in town centre. That hasn't been part of the conversation. Is that accurate? I guess I'm concerned that the folks who are here likely live in that neighborhood are thinking that we have this huge parking challenge here in town centre and that they should expect that. But that isn't the case, because my understanding is that the apartment buildings around here have a surplus of parking, actually, that it's not a huge demand elsewhere else. So is that an accurate? I'm just trying to make sure I understand what the parking implications are.
Your Worship, I'll take a brief stab for a comment on that. During developing revisions to city parking policy, we did do surveys of underground parking lots in the city centre, and we did find a substantial amount of parking still available in some of those buildings. Later on tonight, you will see a report regarding expansion of pay parking, and that's actually in line with trying to get more utilization on site. So
that's very helpful. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. And who would have thought 45 years after my high school buddies and I spent so much time talking about parking on the weekends, that we'd be back talking about parking again so often at city council meetings. So different sort of parking back then, I guess. You younger guys wouldn't understand that, but anyway. So I do have a question to Mr. Rostich about parking. And obviously we've got about the parking in front of us now, not the ones that we did 45 years ago. Obviously, we've got a very experienced developer and experienced architect here. And has there been either any specific analysis or study done of the parking requirements associated with this building? And if not, what does your experience as experienced architects, experienced developer, tell you about the parking requirements for such a building? And does your experience line up with the parking you are intending to provide, or is it a bit of a roll of the dice because this is a new bylaw that we're working under for parking requirements?
You know, that's a very good question, and every location is different. My own personal feeling, having designed so many of these buildings and then actually gone through, and in lots of municipalities you talk about parking provision and are we putting in too many or too few. You don't want to encourage car traffic and travel, but you want to be able to make sure that you've accommodated your parking. I strongly feel that we're going to have a building here that's going to have spaces that are left vacant. That's what I strongly feel. We have projects out at UBC in Westbrook neighborhood. They sell for over $700 a square foot, and there's one stall per unit. And there's not a problem with a lack of parking. Now, it has slightly different kinds of things. Cornerstone, you saw a picture of it. It's a building that we designed and Marcon built at 56th and the bypass right by the skating rink there. The building, I can't tell you, it's about 2/3. The first building is fully occupied, and the spaces are about 2/3 occupied. There is truly, in almost every case, more parking provided than is needed.
And this was the conclusion that the majority of council reached in approving the new bylaw that we have governing the amount of parking space that we're requiring. And so it's good to hear that, again, more evidence that I think we made the right decision and that therefore this is an appropriate level of parking we have for this building. So thank you.
Thank you. If I might, through the mayor, just sort of add one more thing to it. You know, what I found is that if it's a rental building, it might be a slightly different situation. If it's a condominium building, people will purchase knowing how many spaces they can purchase. If they need 2 spaces and they only get 1, they won't purchase that unit. What you don't want to do is reduce the visitor spaces too much, because you don't have control over that. But you know, people make buying decisions based on how many spaces they get. That's self-leveling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I'm not going to sort of comment on the Councillor Neal's parking story, because I think that parking is serious for a concern for a lot of people, and particularly and the lack of parking in my case. So I do know, I think that the challenge that we have on parking is not whether or not we're putting enough underground, but how much parking is on the street. And I think that's what really impacts our residents is street parking, and making sure that we provide the right amount of parking so that we don't have shortages on the street. And I think that, you know, and I think people do purchase you know, based on parking. But I think a lot of people purchase based on the idea that, well, I'll buy a unit that has 1 spot, but I really need 2, but I'll find a place to put my second car. And so often that happens to be on a residential street. So I think that parking is an issue. Even when we think we're providing enough, I think we have to make sure that we are hitting the right spot on the parking. And I'm really concerned about where we're going, and I think that in this area, it's quite possible that when we see SkyTrain and other things coming, there's going to be pressures on this neighborhood, and I think that down the road we're going to have to look at a management or parking management plan for this area, and I just hope that we're not adding to what could be a problem down the road in terms of on-street parking. And I have some other concerns which I'll sort of mention now, but I think they're probably more appropriate to follow up during the development stage of this. But that is during the construction of this, and it is going to be an impact on the neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that's feeling impact now. It's a neighborhood that's in transition with the amount of developments going. I know what it's like because I've lived in a construction zone for 8 years now, so I know what it's like when you have trades parking and there's lack of parking. So I think that when we get to the development permit stage, that we should have a plan in place for dealing with some of the parking during construction, whether that's finding space possibly over at the shopping center. Maybe they can make arrangements, because a lot of people working on a project this size will impact parking on the street. And I think that maybe when we get to that stage, we can look at ways to mitigate some of the traffic concerns and parking concerns during the development stage. So I'll be looking forward to raising that at the appropriate time in the future. Thank you.
And Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, Councillor Hodge took one of my suggestions about for this development, looking at the Coquitlam parking lot, leasing a bit of space for their tradespeople to respect the parking in the neighborhood. The other question I've had tonight is just a thought, and we talk about the parking. I thank Mr. Rochester for pointing out the surplus in these areas. And the thought we had in some areas, and I don't know how you design it for it's possible in your building design, but we talked to someone about having a place where you can have a gate further back that the Strata Council could actually maybe have an area where they could lease out parking and have their own parking if they feel that there's surplus even at 88 units there may be, depending on the transit use, and it becomes a better use of parking for the community in the area, and it adds to the parking stock, and it creates an income for the Strata Council over a period of time. So just a thought. We've talked to a couple of developers for it, but it may not be possible in this design, but it's just something councils raised before, especially when we talk about the surplus of parking that we found out going through the parking thing in the town center in the high-rises here, and just sitting vacant. And it could have been put to better use if they had, at that time, realized that. Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? Please come forward. You'll be stating your name and your address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank Thank you. My name is Marilyn Black. I reside in Coquitlam at 719 Ducklow Street.
Thank you.
It's very interesting to be part of this town council and listen to people's perspective. Living there, I find it right now a very difficult transition. Parking is very much an issue. I took some photos on the weekend of the apartment building which is just west of Emerson, and they have used the parking where we used to have just city property, and they've now designated it, put little placards there and said visitor parking. And this is how they've dealt with their street parking. And this to me is not appropriate. This is a big unit. 3-story in my mind is something I prefer with less than 71 units. There's 3 houses on one side and others on the other. So there's a lot of people going to come into what used to have a duplex and 2 single homes, and now we're putting 71 units with 2 people in there. We have issues that we deal with all the time with, we've got narrow streets, and I would like to, as a minimum, see the criteria that council has met, whether that be for parking or offsets or easements, you know, because this dictates how all the other properties are starting to develop. And once you make an easement for one, then you make an easement for the other. Our Coquitlam Park right now is torn apart. If you look on the east side, they have taken all their high lifts that they use for their cladding and siding, because going down the roads, they had them stockpiled with gravel. They have torn that up completely. I
hate to interrupt.
Okay.
We can only speak to the project in front of us.
Okay, thank you. Yes, okay.
I recognize there are some challenges with another project related
Sure.
to their transition
Sure.
into the park, but that's...
I can
these folks can't be
streamline
held.
this, yes.
Appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
so given that, to go on record, I suppose, is to say that 71 units is a lot of units. There is parking, there is frontage issues that I would really like to see very strictly adhered to, because we are a small community. We're very small. We have duplexes and single-family dwellings, and we're going through a huge transition here. And it is very difficult on us, and so I really hope that the council takes into consideration that we live there every day of our lives, and it's a difficult... so I'd like to see the environment and this property do something that is conducive and melds into our neighborhood. So, thank you.
Okay. No, thank you very much. I didn't mean to cut you off, and I thank you very much for your understanding. Now, 618 Langside is the property that I think she was referring to, and that has been a multifamily project for the last few months and is going to complete probably this summer. But it has created challenges for the neighbors, and I think that's so it's okay to speak about the challenges of construction and the challenges that creates for the neighborhood. We want to respond to those sorts of things. I'm going to ask Bill Suzak, our city engineer, related to the use of boulevard parking or on-street parking for some private use.
Sure. Your Worship, if there's...
Oops. I'll just wait for your microphone.
Press the wrong one, sorry. If there is damage to city property, either in terms of a boulevard or a park or what have you, that needs to be remediated as a condition of final acceptance of the project. I'm trying to think of what exactly the policy is for, say, trades parking. I'm not sure, frankly, that we do have one. It's via use of streets or use of on-site. We certainly work with developers when they have construction operations underway. We've done a fair bit of this up in the Northeast in terms of cleanliness of sites and making sure that pedestrians can safely pass through. I guess what my promise would be is our staff will be certainly visiting this area, the Langside Avenue, and seeing if there is in fact problems, either for safe passage of pedestrians or improperly parked vehicles, and we'll take it from there.
Now, she mentioned on-site right now across the street from 618, in front of 621 there at Langside, there are signs put up by the developer, I assume, of 618 that say no trades parking on this side. I don't know if that was the signs she interpreted to be visitors parking signs, or is there some actual signs that say visitors parking?
Yes, it's the property that was where the old Safeway was.
Got it, okay.
And that whole house, I believe it's 613, and the whole side there has now been designated as visitor parking with their property.
Okay. Well, we're going to have engineering or property use or someone have a look at that, because it's the city street is meant for public parking. We may have to impose some kind of requirement, or rather prohibition or restriction related to trades parking to see if we can manage a situation, but that's for another day. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I appreciate the residents' concern, because I think that we learn from past projects, and I think that if we can try to, as staff and as a city, try to make sure that as we move forward, we try and do the next one better and work with the developers to do that. And I thank you, because you did answer my first question. My other question was just looking at roads and everything. In this part, we're building to standard road widths. There's parking on both sides of the road. We're not anticipating any changes in road configuration or anything. I guess there'll be no parking in the lane, of course. Is there anything else that's going to be changing from the street standpoint and transportation in this neighborhood?
Your Worship, I'm not aware of any changes to the use and function of the overall corridor. Unless something has come forward through the development process that's unusual, we're not intending on changing parking capacity.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? Second time, are there any other speakers to this item? Please step forward. No, don't. Please feel free to just come forward when I call that. So.
The reason I come here, and also my wife is here, the reason is because we are your immediate neighbor to this construction property.
And your name?
So we live on the 607B, the west to this property.
Okay.
And I have a question to the city. And what's the minimum by the city law? What's the minimum gap between two properties?
I'll answer you as soon as you tell me what your name is.
No, we want to know that clearly, because we don't want the property so close to us and that impact us.
I wonder if you could give us your name.
Sorry?
Your name.
My name is Leon Wen.
Leon Wen.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Now, your first question was?
Now, first question is, what's the gap between the two properties, the minimum, based on the city?
Between the side yard setback, between the proposed development property.
Side to side wall.
Understand.
Yeah.
The side yard setback between the proposed development and the neighboring property?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Tiffany.
Your Worship, the interior side yard would be 4.5 meters on both sides.
Okay, so 4.5 meters from the property line to the building on both sides of the proposed building.
1.5.
4.5.
4.5 either.
Yeah, about 14 feet.
Okay. And no matter for it's useful or useless, I still want to express our strong concern, and we are strongly object to this project. Not only because during the construction phase, it will cause a lot of problem for like the parking and the security, and also after the completion of the construction, and still we will face the problem like the parking or some other issue. And we have the existing construction on the behind our backyard, and we are very good to live there. But during the existing construction, we lost our garbage can, and also garbage can. And when we got the new garbage can, someone threw some new garbage into our garbage can after the clearance on that day. So also we have the problem to, you see, the parking, and someone put the car in front of our building. So we have the problem to move out and sometimes move in. Mm-hmm. So it's really the mess. And another problem is on our roof we have the glass, and that's installed on the top of our bathroom. So because this building is almost a full floor high. So my question is, how can we protect our privacy?
Yeah. Now, on this map, which property is yours? Can you?
607B. immediate to your...
Okay, so number 23, the big
Yeah.
number 23 on the Emerson side. Okay.
So we are only the 2 floors duplex. So if you have the high building on the top, on the roof, the glass installed there. So what can we do?
I'm putting it to Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, if I take the gentleman's questions, it sounds like you have a sunlight on your roof that faces the proposed project?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're worried about the privacy?
That's on the roof, on the top of the roof.
On top of the roof is a sunlight that allows light into your house?
Just to get the more light into the room. Yeah.
Okay. As my colleague, Ms. Tiffany, pointed out, the proposed building, as it's designed now, meets the zoning setback requirement of 4.5 meters. So it's set back from your property 4.5 meters. Now, in comparison, if this was being built as a single family or a duplex, it could be as close as 1.5 meters, 5 feet from the property line. So with multifamily, it's recognized because the building is is larger and taller, it's set back more. I'm not sure if there's any landscaping being proposed along that edge, and perhaps the applicant's architect could speak to that, because that would provide some screening along that side. And I guess ultimately in time, and obviously you as the property owner next door, your property may be redeveloped in time itself. And so there may be something else, higher density going on your property at your call at some point. So it's one of those situations where a neighborhood is in transition, it's changing. The official community plan would envision multifamily apartment buildings. Mm-hmm. So that's the blueprint for the future. And then it's up to the individual property owners to come forward and make their applications for rezoning on a case-by-case basis. So I'm not sure, Your Worship, if I can comment further than that.
If it's window, we can use it, put the curtain or shutter or something. But on the roof, I don't know how we can protect.
I need to let you know that just west of the word Emerson is a high-rise tower that's going to be built there. It's under construction now.
Oh, sorry, can you say
a high-rise tower.
Right, yeah.
And it's actually the top floor of that will be about 45 degrees from your roof, and the balconies will be about 30 degrees. So in fact, the tower will look down upon your roof more. So I mean this is going to happen as we develop higher densities, particularly around our stations, our SkyTrain stations. We're trying to transition from the higher top buildings to the lower buildings. Mm-hmm. But sometimes there will be a shorter building next to a taller building, and we recognize though that that's your concern.
But maybe the high-rise for the west side doesn't impact ours, but the building, the high building on east side, because the roof is faced to the east side.
No, I do understand.
Yeah.
When we put apartment buildings, typically, eventually there's a shorter building next to it, and it's going to be a challenge somewhere along the road.
So I just want to
I understand.
Yeah, raise this to you and let you know that's the situation we will face.
No, appreciate it.
And the last question, what will be physically set up between the two properties, like the fence or something?
We put up there's a graphic that shows some elements. Ms. Tiffany?
Is there any fence physically placed there?
Why don't we try the next one?
So we want to know the sum.
No, the one above. It would be part of the development permit, but right now the proposal is, let's go with, keep going down.
Your Worship, if I may?
Okay. That's the one.
Yes, that's the one. And that's articulating exactly what I was just going to say, which was there's proposed landscaping along that eastern elevation, along with some fencing. That rendering, most likely, I don't know if it shows the trees at mature height or not, but it is I think, pretty typical in terms of what you would see with full maturity of the landscaping along that property line.
So you mean some plants there?
Yes,
They're proposing a row of
plants, shrubbery, as well as some fencing along that edge.
Okay. Okay, so when you said the gap, that's the 4.5, that's from the fence to from the fence. So tree will be on outside of the...
To reiterate, the setbacks along that particular property line are 4.5 meters. So the building that you're seeing there, if I may, with my arrow, I don't know if you can see this, it's somewhat dark in the rendering. It shows the building. It should be placed 4.5 meters along this property line. So there's a reasonable setback in terms of the medium density structure, which, as Mr. McIntyre pointed out, it's much further away than what you would have under a duplex development under the RT1 zone.
So for clarity, the light-colored lawn is this gentleman's lawn, and the property line delineates the...
Yes, I would...
It looks like that.
Yes.
It looks like that's what it's tried to depict. Yeah. So the hedge would be on the neighboring property. It's part of the setback.
Okay.
Okay, you can always come back if you have more questions. Okay, are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers? Please come forward.
Oh, I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Just seeking some clarity from staff here. I've been trying to figure out the aerial maps that I can find online with the attachment one we have on our big program here. And if you look at attachment 1, which is the aerial view with a red line around the 3 properties, this one there, okay. Now you see that the right hand of those 3 properties has sort of a Y-shaped driveway, and I drove into this neighborhood a little while ago, and I took a picture of the 3 houses that now comprise the subject property, and of the 3 houses, the one on the far right has the Y-shaped, and it's a boarded-up duplex, and it's an older building, and there seem to be, according to my picture here, 2 other buildings to the left of it, 2 other homes, and then the property immediately to the left of that is a vacant lot, according to my picture here. And so I'm trying to figure out how this gentleman lives next door when it's, according to my picture, it's a vacant lot actually here. And so maybe the gentleman who was just speaking, can he tell me where this vacant lot is? Maybe the vacant lot, maybe the developer can tell me. Is the vacant lot part of the, is it the most westerly of the 3 properties? Is that 611? Is that the vacant one?
Were you on Regan, Councillor?
Yeah, I was. I've definitely got pictures here. So I don't know if you followed all that. Is 611 currently vacant?
Yes, 611 is vacant.
Okay. So then there's 2 homes, it looks like, immediately to the right of it, according to this anyway. So they must all be, those 2 homes must be sharing a single lot. 2 fairly new homes, actually. And then there's the older duplex that's boarded up. That was my confusion. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking your time, but it was, want to make sure I got it right. Okay.
Please. Where did you go? Please come forward.
Okay. So with that.
My name is Jessie Zhang. I live in the townhouse. Actually, it's not right next to it, but it's in the neighborhood. So I bought my house in early 2010. So after that, I noticed a lot of rezoning happened in the neighborhood area. So it makes like the area is very crowded. Then I moved in. So I have some concern about so many like rezoning happened in the neighborhood area. And I think the parking might be a huge problem after all the people moved in, because I would say after all the project finished, all the people moved in, it will be very crowded in the area. And my own concern is when I bought my townhouse, I actually have a view of the mountain in my backyard and in my living room. But after this rezoning, I lost it. So I would say it will impact my own property value in that view. So I would say I hope the council can consider the existing residents' benefit before you approve more new rezoning in that area.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item, please? Now, wait just one moment. Are there any other speakers who haven't spoken yet that wanted to speak, come forward and speak? Seeing none, please come forward then. We are webcast, so the people at home don't get to hear the question unless you speak into the microphone. Okay.
Can you tell me what easements the developer is asking for based on the current requirements for that property, and then what he's asking for any easements besides the parking? Are there any other?
Okay, variances, I assume you mean. Variances.
Your Worship, in answer to the question with regard to variance, there is a proposed variance for lot coverage in the zone. The variance will be determined as we move forward with the development permit stage, but it's currently the lot coverage is at around 68%, and the zone allows for a maximum of 55%.
So that's a variance of 50 to 68?
13%.
Not 13 points, 13 points.
13%. So they're asking for 68% lot coverage. The zone allows for a maximum of 55%.
13 points, okay.
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 Are those the only two then? Just the parking and the...
That's it for variances?
Variances?
As of right now, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, variances are normally dealt with a development permit.
Right.
Because this is just deciding whether it ought to be a multifamily building.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Please step forward. Councillor Nicholson. You can take the microphone, but Councillor Nicholson will speak first.
Hi, my name is Helen.
Just a moment, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just did some quick math, and in fact, the variance is 24% of the allowable. It's 13 percentage points against 55. So it's really a 24% variance, which is more significant than 13. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, my name is Helen. I have a question.
Pull it right down to your...
Yeah.
There you go.
Is city has any bylaw for construction?
Your address is?
My address 607B Regan Avenue.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Yes.
I'm just asking any construction bylaw at night, because for current contractor, last year when they're driving pile in the 1 a.m. morning. So I called the police. Police said city allowed.
At what time?
1 o'clock in the morning, 1 a.m.
They drove piles?
Yes. And I, not only myself, even my neighbor called the police. We called the police. Police said city doesn't, city allowed.
I would call the police too. We do have a bylaw.
Yeah, I have a similar question, because this new property will just beside us, even closer than
I understand. And I ask you not judge this particular proponent based on what someone else did, and I'm going to find out what someone else did. Mr. Suzak.
Your Worship, our construction bylaw allows construction Monday to Saturday from the hours of, I believe it's 7 a.m., but I'm not completely sure, but I believe it's 7 a.m. Through to as late as 10 p.m., but certainly not after 10 p.m.
So 1 a.m. pile driving.
1 a.m. No, that's
not even Eastern Standard.
Not even close, Your Worship.
Okay.
But what happened if happen again?
Okay.
After 10.
There is a phone number. I'll give you Mr. Suzak's phone number.
Yeah, sure. Because we call police. Even police doesn't have. Yeah.
For anyone, this is actually the 24-hour line for the engineering department, 927-3500. And complaints like that, we do respond because there are restrictions on hours of construction unless it's a bridge going over the Fraser River.
I think my neighbor called the city. City doesn't say anything.
Yeah, you call the city at 927-3500. 927. Yeah, she'll write it down for you. Okay? 24 hours. Yeah. It won't always be Mr. Suzak, but...
You know, you can phone there, but you won't get no action. Not after 1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, there's always someone there, and I've always got action at 1 in the
Yeah, the
morning.
night watchman may go down.
Well, it actually goes to the fire department, Lou. Okay, are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Thank you very much for all your input. I declare this item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moving now to item 2. Item 2 is an application to amend the City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw number 3000/1996 to permit public service uses in several of the city's commercial and industrial zones. This is bylaw number 4384, and Ms. Tiffany is here to provide an introduction.
Good evening again. This proposed zoning bylaw text amendment would amend the zoning bylaw to permit public service uses in several of the city's commercial and industrial zones. This amendment is intended to accommodate facilities such as communications hub sites operated by a government body or company operating under the Utilities Commissions Act. Specifically, the proposed text amendments would allow the following: permit public service uses in the M1, M2, and M6 industrial zones, permit public service uses in the M9 zone only when completely enclosed within a building, and permit public service uses in the C2, C4, C5, C7 commercial zones, the CS1 service commercial zone, the M3 special industrial, and M8 retail light industrial zones only when completely enclosed within a building and there's no storefront. Staff are recommending all final readings to bylaw number 4384.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, what do you mean by public service use? Can you explain to me what is it that you're intending to put in? Some of the uses?
This was described at first reading, so we...
Through your worship, in answer to the councillor's question, public service use is currently already identified in the zoning bylaw, and it is identified to mean any service that's providing for a use that's providing for service for the city or for a government body or any company that operates under the Utilities Commissions Act. What we are doing with the zoning bylaw text amendment is we're introducing that use, which is already defined within the zoning bylaw, into these zones as I outlined as a permitted use.
Okay, number one, what would Shaw want to do with the public service use permit? What would Shaw do with one of those buildings?
Well, it's in the packet. Go ahead.
Shaw is proposing a communications hub site, which would be considered a public service use because they do operate under the Utilities Commissions Act. And the communications hub site as a public service use would be permitted in the various zones that we are proposing the amendments to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No others? Do we have a speakers list for this one? No.
There are no speakers, but the applicant is here to respond to questions if needed by council.
Mr. Shaw.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Are there any speakers to this item? Any questions to this item? Any queries about this item? Any speakers, third and final time? Any speakers about this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 3 is an application to amend the Citywide Official Community Plan Bylaw number 3479/2001 to amend the Citywide Official Community Plan to incorporate the results of Phase 1 of the Design Guideline Consolidation Project. This is Bylaw number 4295, and Mr. Johansson is here to provide an introductory comments.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I will provide a brief overview of this bylaw. based on council direction to improve city policy and processes, staff have undertaken a design guideline consolidation project to streamline, consolidate, and update the city's design guidelines and place them into a new section of the Citywide Official Community Plan, or OCP. This proposed new OCP section will contain citywide design principles and development permit area guidelines, and the bylaw being presented at tonight's public hearing is an amendment to the OCP to incorporate the first phase results of this project into the OCP. And this first phase involved a review and consolidation of the city's existing guidelines, specifically involving a consolidation of 530 guidelines into 195 guidelines. The second phase of this project involves development of select new guidelines to fill policy gaps, and that second phase will be completed by the end of this year, and a separate bylaw will be brought forward for that. So in summary, staff recommend that council give all readings to this bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I do understand what this is, and it is a I mean, we have so many guidelines, I guess you can get pretty confused very easily in the interpretation of the guidelines. But I am very interested in reviewing our design guidelines, OCP citywide, and taking a look, because I think to keep our city fresh, we can only have so many homes with pointy roofs and vinyl siding and certain colors and certain styles, and I think a lot of cities, the progressive cities, look towards their guidelines and change them once in a while to just keep the city fresh looking. And so I'll support this, but I am going to look forward to staff working on a new design guidelines, but this will make it easier, I believe.
Councillor Reid, I'm sure you meant you'll open your mind during the public hearing.
Pardon?
We're about to have a public hearing. We're at the public hearing.
Yes.
You said you'd support it. That's all.
I'm sorry. I don't have a problem doing that.
I know you
think
meant.
Somebody else said that.
I know what you meant.
So my point is when we consolidate this, then we'll have a smaller base to work with, correct? If we would go forward and change design guidelines. It will make it easier.
Your Worship, if I could, yeah, this just always was envisioned to be, excuse me, sort of a two-phase project, and Councillor Reid's quite correct. The first phase was to consolidate, to prune it down, to streamline it, get things into a little better alignment. We're hoping it's a more user-friendly, helpful tool in putting it in this format. And I think in doing that, it also sets it up nicely for the second stage, which is as we go forward with some of the, and I would suggest at the neighborhood plan level, yes. Like we were just talking previously about a project in Coquitlam, maybe when we get into the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan process update later this year, we would, let's go back and revisit the design guidelines applicable to that area, and do they need to be updated or tweaked or given some range and diversity? So staff will certainly take that away and have that in mind when we come forward with the work program for that neighborhood plan.
And this will be citywide.
I guess my response to the chair is that there may be some good design ideas coming out of that type of neighborhood plan process that could be applied citywide, but I think also we want to have a little bit of character across the community. What sort of be the palette of design options in city center, I would think would be quite a bit different than some of the shoulder areas around Coquitlam or Pardon Creek Village Center. So I think we need to have a little bit of variation across the community.
We want leeway. I just don't want to be so prescriptive anymore. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you very much.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is consolidated and simplified.
Yeah, you should have seen it before.
Yes, well, that's exactly my point. I believe what I'm hearing from staff is that the end result is no different. Assuming we were to pass this later this evening, the impact on development guidelines on developers on anything that came along would be no different tomorrow morning than it would have been this morning. Is that correct? Or are there some tweaking, some simplification, some changes, perhaps perceived as minor by staff, but not at this point known particularly to me?
Your Worship, again, our intent was through this first phase, it was to consolidate and streamline, not to make changes, right? Not to make substantive changes, not to come in with a new design ideas. I know Carl and his staff went through quite a process to arrive at that consolidation, somewhat simplification, but not varying from what we had before in terms of the design guidelines. That would have to wait the phase 2. Now, Carl or Andrew, who work more closely on the project, might be able to speak to that to give Council some assurance of just what that process was, if they can.
Well,
yes.
Before Carl goes, I'll tell you the question I was going to ask, and then I decided to be kind and not ask it, but it'll give you an indication of where I'm trying to get to. I was going to ask you whether there was somewhere in the offices a concordance, something that said, this is what it was, and this is what it will be, and you can connect the dots and say,
yes,
was 4.5 meters still 4.5 meters, or all that sort of thing?
Yes, there was a concordance.
He didn't ask that. He said he wasn't going to ask that.
I decided that question might actually be the simpler question rather than the more complex one I asked. But the response that Mr. McIntyre gave me had a couple of, I like simple statements, and there were a couple of adjectives, and I'm never sure whether they're adjectives or adverbs. I leave that to Councillor O'Neill. But no substantive change. Well, substantive is in the eye of the beholder. So if I don't know what the change is, I really don't want to go read the concordance. So could perhaps if you offered me a couple of examples of not substantive changes, that would help me achieve the level of comfort that I may need later this evening.
I've just asked Andrew Merrill, our Planner 1, to give an example, so he's thinking on that, specifically regarding the Northeast area plan. But I just wanted to just provide further comment to what Jim said. We did consult with the Urban Development Institute and the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association with this phase, and we gave them a copy of the draft guidelines, so we didn't hear anything back from them on that. And in the second phase, that's where we'll be looking at addressing policy gaps and bringing forward new guidelines. And that phase will involve public consultation. So just wanted to clarify that.
Did you talk long enough for Andrew to think of it?
And through the chair, an example of what we considered a non-substantive change was there's about 4 different ways in the the existing guidelines where we referred to how commercial frontages had to address a street and where those would be located within a neighborhood. Sometimes they were called mandatory commercial street frontage on a map, or mandatory retail street, or a retail street frontage, and we decided to standardize the name of that in the OCP. So when we say mandatory commercial street frontage, it means the same thing in City Centre as it does in Coquitlam, instead of having to remember 2 different names for the same thing.
But the characteristics are unchanged. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any speakers to this item?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sandra Marsden. I live at 3420 Highland Drive in Northeast Coquitlam. In regards to Bylaw 4295-2013, only for the Burke Mountain neighborhoods, because that is where I live and I'm familiar with them, I did take the time to look up and compare each of the changes to the Canada-wide Coquitlam. Canada-wide. Well, I'm just impressed with what I've heard tonight.
We tried to make a Canada-wide one.
Well, the CWOCP, which are being proposed in the new bylaw. In doing the comparison, for the most part, I can understand the need to reorganize the bylaws and avoid repetition, and found much of the information was simply being referenced to other documents. The only caution I could determine was to make sure that the new bylaw changes suggested would still result in the details of the old wording of Part 3, Chapters and Policy, not being diluted in content and intent, and that the details of the citywide OCP being changed are still located somewhere, even though perhaps reorganized in the new document, such as being in Part 4 of the citywide OCP, Schedule C of the stream classification, and or Schedule D of the NECAP. When revisions are made, often it results in reduced wording. Assurances would be nice that in the process of reorganizing and updating, the intent of the details are not lost in the replacement generalizations. I always thought that points and policy kept within the citywide OCP would carry more weight for implementation by developers than if these points and policy were taken out of the citywide OCP and put as guidelines for development. So I am to understand that the selected items to be deleted in Part 3, Chapter 11, 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3 for Burke Mountain will just be put in another section, such as Part 4 of the citywide OCP, and not deleted from the OCP. I did receive, I checked with several people in planning and community planning, and I did receive affirmative responses, as we have tonight. The response was along the lines of, yes, the intent in Phase 1 is simply to reorganize, consolidate, and simplify the OCP guidelines to remove redundancy and repetition. We have intended to ensure there are no collateral issues in this effort that affect any substantive policy areas whatsoever. I note your caution and can confirm there should not be any effect in the substance or application of existing policies in this area. I also received an email from Andrew Merrill from Community Planning, and he offered to meet with me, which we did, and we looked in detail at each of the sections to be changed. And I just want to stand here and say that I am satisfied from what I have heard and observed that the context and intent will be kept in the revised citywide OCP. And I would like to thank, and again, I'm only talking on behalf as an individual who lives in the Burke Mountain area. I'm not talking for the rest of the city of Coquitlam. But I'd like to thank Raul and Carl and Andrew and Michael for their comments and detailed explanations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nicholson.
No, that would be my error. I did not cancel Councillor Nicholson's mic from the last intervention.
Well,
he intuited that I didn't really wish to speak.
Yes.
How intuitive. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, any other speakers to this item? This item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is the last item on the public hearing portion of this evening's agenda.
Okay. In a moment, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll reopen as a city council meeting in about 2 or 3 minutes.